got to talk about Joe Rogan, of course, because Joe Rogan and Dr. Phil decided to get together and have a conversation, which, of course, means that the IQ of the room dropped down several points. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that here in just a second. But first, let's go ahead and talk about the fan art of today. This one is from Dog in the Discord. It is apparently a princessy Suris and a horse. And the conversation reads, "A horse? A horse? Why do I have a horse? All fan art is canon. That doesn't explain why I have a horse. You made that rule yourself. Why do I have a horse? I should not have made all fan art canon. now I have a horse, apparently. According to people. Congrats on the horse. God! Anyway, thank you for the fan art submission. If you want your fan art shown in a future video, just drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. With that said, let's talk about this here. The video is called "Canada Has No Parental Rights. Is the USA Next?" God, I can feel the room temperature. I can feel the room temperature going. Let's go ahead and take a look.
Not possible.
No, and it's accelerating and not decelerating yet, but I'm beginning to sense that there's a pushback.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think they've made a serious miscalculation. They pushed so hard and so long that they've started to wake up.
Don't you like the vague use of they? Doesn't the vague use of they always make it easier to understand who anybody's talking about?
Up middle America to the point that they're saying, wait a minute, what? That's not okay. When they start rewriting history, when they start rewriting science, when they start...
So when did history get rewritten, and in what way? And how is... Science is always being rewritten. That's the nature of science. Like, one of the benefits of science is its ability to engage in internal introspection and peer review. And it is constantly changing in that information is being added to it, and hypotheses are being the needles are being moved further and further, one way or another. Theories are being constructed off of the bodies of facts that we are able to produce. Science is in a constant state of flux. Science is not this set of facts that you memorized in school. And considering that Dr. Phil here actually does have a PhD, though he hasn't been practicing with it in any way, shape, or form since 2006, you would think that he would know that. But, you know, anywho.
Start trying to get the government to co-parent with you, with your child. People start saying, okay, whoa.
The government's been co-parenting with your children for the long... Like, you were already co-parented by the government anyway. Everybody's been co-parented by the government because... Your roads are paid for by taxes. Your schools are paid for by taxes. Your curriculum is set up democratically, in theory. Your government has been co-parenting your kid, whether you like it or not. And given the absolute state of many people who try to engage in what they ostensibly try to call homeschooling, I'm actually more okay with that than anything. Though I would hope that our public education system would get better and improve somewhat, because it's not been in a great state for a little while.
Wait a minute. I didn't mind when you were running around here talking crazy, but now you're starting to get into my business. Like my grandmother used to say, now you've gone from preaching to meddling now.
Well, you know what's happening in Canada, right? I mean,
what?
Canada has some pretty insane cases that are going on right now about gender transition from really young kids. And there's all...
Define really young kids. Because, like, if we're talking 16, 17 years old, that's not a really young kid. That's a teenager about to become an adult.
Let's push back with parents, and there's all this, because the parents are not being told that their children want to transition. So
parents not being told their kids want to transition is actually a good thing, because you are always rolling the die on whether you're going to have a bigoted parent, whether you're going to have a abusive parent. Instead of rolling that die, it is infinitely safer. It is always infinitely safer to keep that kind of information at the child's discretion. When the child feels that it is safe for them to come out to their parents, they can and will do so. If the teacher, here's the thing. What is the teacher going to do? Give HRT in the form of Skittles as a snack to the kids? No. The most they're going to do is just affirm their gender. Just be like, yeah, no, Susie wants to be called Tom. All right. When I'm taking attendance, I'm going to call you Tom. There. That's as far as my job has to go. That's all it has to be. The parent is the one, until that kid is, of age, that is going to be able to make the determination on whether that kid goes through any transitionary things at all, whether it be seeking therapy, whether it be going on hormones, whether it be just getting puberty blockers to buy time. No matter what the scenario, that parent, that guardian, is going to be the one in control of that anyway. So why does it matter that that information gets handed out to the parent? Why should that information have to be handed out to the parent outside of the consent of the kid?
There's this guy that was talking about these issues of parents' rights in Canada, and he specifically said that parents don't have rights in Canada, that they have, I feel like
So we don't have a study, we have some guy said. This is the intellectual rigor that people expect from Joe Rogan. Some guy said this thing. Won't you comment on some guy in some place who said something? Isn't it so important for us to talk about some guy?
He said they have obligations. Is that the term he used? But he said under Canadian law, parents don't have rights. Like, what the fuck are you saying? Let me make sure that's exactly what he said before I get sued. But when I saw it, I was like, this is such a crazy thing to say.
I mean, here's the thing, though. What rights do you require as a parent? Because outside of, like, a right to custody and maybe a right to governmental support, what rights does a parent need in regards to a child? I'm talking about legal rights, not some strange abstract definition of a right, but, like, from a legal perspective. What rights do you need here? In fact, actually, we can very quickly... rights do parents have in Canada? Under Section 2A of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, parents have the constitutional right to determine all aspects of their children's education, including religious education. This right can be restricted when the decisions go against the best interests of the child. Oh God, what is that? What is that? We have actual legal rights we can talk about when it comes to parents? That's so weird. The duties of a parent are providing necessities, protection, and financial support. They have let's see here. They have rights to education. Parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education given to the children. They have access to, they have right to determine all aspects of said education. They have a right to access student records. Let's see here. That's weird. God, that sounds like they have rights, Joe Rogan. That sounds like whatever some guy said in some clip on some stream is actually irrelevant to the fact that rights legally exist for parents in Canada. That's so weird. That's so strange. Isn't it so strange that only, what, a handful of minutes? 1 minute, 38 seconds. 1 minute, 38 seconds into the video, and they're already lying. Or rather, not lying so much as saying something that is untrue.
And if that's the way their law is structured, fix that. Like, who are other people to tell you how to parent your child?
So let's see. If you're an abusive parent, then other people have every right to tell you how to parent your child. Have you ever read A Child Called It? Have you ever read that book? Because, like, that's one of those foundational pieces of literature that I think everybody should have to read if they ever want to have this particularly brain-dead take. The mentality of, who are you to tell me how to raise my kid, is the kind of mentality that leads to that. Other people do have a right to tell you how to raise your kid because you are not a professional child raiser. You didn't get a fucking PhD in child rearing, and even if you did, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are the best person for this job anyway. Said, sir, are they just lying and not exaggerating or embellishing? They are saying something that is untrue. The intentionality may not be to mislead. If I were to give benefit of the doubt, the intentionality here is to simply communicate what was said by another person. But they are then taking that anecdote that was communicated by that other person and using it as the crux of an argument instead of using... whoa, what is this place? What? Where the fuck is this person? I need to know. I need to go into that hidden shape. That's so cool. Anyway... What Joe Rogan likes to do on his podcast is say a thing out of the aether and then use it as a talking point to springboard. And the thing is, I've dealt with people who deal with this kind of conversation all the time. Instead of wanting facts and studies and stats, a lot of times they will say, some guy said, and let's use that as a talking point for conversation. Now, because the ethos of the Joe Rogan podcast is not to inform, it is to entertain, I can understand why this is the case. The problem is that there are people who watch the Joe Rogan podcast as if it is educational material.
And who are these people? Have they been vetted? Are they really good at parenting? They're supposed to be teachers. They're not supposed to be parents.
Actually, all teachers are co-parents. All of them. Do you know why? Because they have to babysit your snot-nosed brat for 8 hours a day. That makes them co-parents. I'm sorry. Not in a legal sense, but in a pragmatic sense. They are engaging in as much parenting as anybody else at that point.
Here's my problem with that. If you look at this right now, and I understand, I don't know if you know, but I'm starting a whole new network called Merritt Street Media.
No, I didn't know.
Yeah, and we launch at the 1st of April. We were going to launch at the end of February, but we've delayed it a month in order to pick up some more massive distribution. And I have committed myself to owning the debate lane in America. I'm willing to let all sides come and say what they want to say, but they got to be willing to answer hard questions. And I've had some of these folks, I've already shot about 30 shows on Dr. Phil Primetime, and we're going to have 4 hours of news and a whole lot of other programming, but it's all about, I mean, let's be commonsensical. Let's look at the facts. Let's look at science.
Those are two separate things, though. So common sense is not facts. Common sense is not science. Common sense is the myriad of prejudices that you have accumulated up until the exact point where you are currently at in life. That is what common sense is. That is not what science is. That is not what facts are. That is literally, like I said, just whatever biases you've accumulated up until that point. People like to use common sense as a refrain, but they are often talking about their opinion. It's just their opinion. And they call it common sense because it feels like common sense to them.
Let's not look at what you want to be the truth. Let's look at what is the facts. Let's look at what is science. And we've got these people that, it's interesting they choose words like gender-affirming care. You know, that's interesting that they call it that, but really what they're talking about is hormonal therapy or sex reassignment surgery.
No. Gender-affirming care refers to everything in the spectrum of those two things you noted, and also simply calling somebody by the name they choose. It's everything from that all the way up to sexual reassignment surgery. That's gender affirming care. So when somebody says gender affirming care for a child, they're not talking about cutting off their willy and carving a hole in them or some stupid shit. What they are talking about is appropriate affirming care for that age group. So if we are talking about a child who is aged 6, 7, 8, and they say, Mom, I feel like I'm a boy, Mom, I feel like I'm a girl, anything like that, the typical and also science-based approach to that is to have the child seek therapy and then explore that. Typically, this will lead to a period of what's called social transition. This period of social transition can be anywhere from a few weeks to a few months to even a few years. During social transition, you are encouraged to explore that feeling of sometimes gender dysphoria, sometimes gender euphoria, whatever it may be, that feeling of disillusionment with the gender that you were born and assigned as. Or the sex you were born and assigned as, I guess, is the best way of putting it. So, typically, this means that we would use the correct pronouns for this person during the time that they are learning whether or not this is right for them. We might allow them to cross-dress for a certain amount of time every week so that they can see how comfortable they feel in those clothes. Do they feel better when they play with boys' toys or girls' toys? Do they feel better when they are wearing boys' clothes or girls' clothes? And for anybody who wants to be a pedant and say that there are no such thing as either of those things, understanding that gender is as much a social construct as anything else will help you understand that the types of toys and everything else that we associate with those genders ends up being as important to the trans individuals who engage with that as really anything else. So people will engage with that particular aspect of their identity for an amount of time. And sometimes we'll find that they actually... Oh, there's just a Peter Griffin here. I thought that was a mural on the wall. I didn't realize that was actually the Peter Griffin trying to kill me. But people will spend time discerning if this is right for them, if this feels correct, if they feel comfortable in the skin that they are functionally fashioning for themselves. And if so, if that maintains, they then go on puberty blockers for usually about 5 years. That's about the amount of time that we would typically give for puberty blockers, because that is the amount of time that we've determined is safe for them. During this time, your hormones are not functionally changing, and the side effects to your body are basically identical to that of any other common late-term puberty. Once that is done, once that, 5-ish years is done, if this gender incongruence is maintained, the next step is to then give hormone therapy, a supplement that will allow them to have the puberty of their choosing as opposed to the puberty that they are forced into, and this is typically given around the age of 16 or 17. After this time of gender incongruence, after this age of 16 or 17, they then have an amount of time with these hormones. And only after they are a legal adult or have reached whatever the age of informed consent is, only then do we actually allow things like surgery to happen at that point. So when people like Dr. Phil say that, oh no, they're trying to do all these things to the kids, no. There is a long and vetted process, some would even say an arduous process, that is taken with trans youth. Or, more accurately, potentially trans youth. And yet, people like Dr. Phil will go on and give this misinformation that causes people to stigmatize themselves more and more against each other. So parents of trans kids now feel like they have to justify every decision they've ever made, even if it is literally in line with understood and accepted science on gender-affirming care. So, no, Phil. Gender-affirming care does not just mean surgeries. It does not just mean hormone injections. It's everything from the smallest to the largest thing we can do for that trans individual, or for that potentially trans individual. And there are people who do find, when they engage in gender-affirming care, that they are not actually comfortable in the gender that they have thought they would be comfortable in. Boy wears girl clothes, doesn't feel comfortable in them, and starts realizing their gender identity is actually closer to something that is non-binary, or even sometimes often the case, they just go, actually, I think I'm cis. I've tried these things, I've tried the gender buffet, as it were, and I know where I am, and I know what I like. But people like Dr. Phil literally will make their money by engaging in what he calls common sense, which, again, is literally just accumulated biases.
On children. And in fairness, the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Endocrine Society, or whatever the exact name of that is, all of the major medical associations have signed off on this, Joe. They've signed off on it.
Do you know why they signed off on it? Because it's evidence-based, my guy. They signed off on it because we have evidence of better outcomes for people who go through these processes. An overwhelming amount of positive outcomes, mind you. Over 80%. There are more people satisfied with gender-affirming care and the later surgeries that may come from it than are satisfied with fucking knee replacements, William.
And I have never seen those organizations sign off on anything with less information as to whether or not it does long-term harm of anything in my life. And when
But we have done research on the long-term harm that it can do. We understand the issues of bone density that can come from using puberty blockers. We understand the issues of how important it is to engage in hormone balancing with people who, say, get castrated when they are engaging in gender-affirming care. Because some people do. Some trans women decide that they don't actually want to have nuts. There are some trans guys who decide that they don't actually want or need to have their ovaries. And so they want to get rid of those things. And we have plenty of data to show what should and should not be done with these individuals so that they can have a good quality of life. These are known variables. Now, should more research be done into these? Absolutely. There are areas of trans research that we actually do not know as much about as we should. As an example, many trans women experience having what could be called a period. Now, this is not a period in the traditional sense of bleeding, but there are often cis women who have period symptoms without blood. And so when somebody is having these symptoms, do we just tell them, no, it's all in your head? Or do we do research and say, well, why are you having these symptoms? Why are you having these cramps? Why are you uncomfortable? Why are you having these levels of irritability that would be associated with a woman's monthly cycle? When we know that the hormone that is mostly associated with having those symptoms comes from the uterus and the production of it, what other factor is happening in the body that is causing similar symptoms? Symptoms of period shedding are not happening in these instances, but other instances like cramping are. So why is that the case? There is more research that needs to be done on that. And medical institutions that have done research into this have pointed out that anecdotally there is plenty of evidence to support that this happens, but what we do not yet understand is the why, at least not entirely. Not to a degree of comfortability when constructing a theory. Said I literally had an argument with one of my Jeebus juice drinking coworkers over gender non-conforming people just last night. Just yikes. Yeah. Like, do we know everything possibly that could be known? No. We also don't know everything that could possibly be known about literally every other field of science. Literally every field of science is a field that we are learning more and more about practically every month. Even if it is small and incremental as opposed to something that is in great strides, we do learn these things. I am torn on whether I should actually continue more of this video itself, because I don't know what more information can come from Joe and Phil here. And unfortunately, as is the nature with most information, the amount of time that it takes to deconstruct an incorrect statement is infinitely larger than the amount of time that it takes to say the incorrect statement. So ironically, there are several non-conforming people within our own company. Nice. Have you seen the new 2022 trans survey? The one that shows over 80% satisfaction rate with gender confirming care? Is that the one you're talking about? Because if so, yes. That's actually what I'm talking about. So, I don't know. We'll play a little more of the video. Let's see if things improve.
When I ask about that, when I bring that up, then they immediately label you as transphobic.
So, while it is not helpful to label every person who has opposition to trans healthcare, oftentimes due to ignorance, as transphobic, it is still a truism that is more often than not. That is more often true than not. There, those are the words I'm trying to say.
And I thought that the deal was first do no harm, and all of the
no. So first do no harm is not actually the Hippocratic Oath itself, but that's not the important part. The important thing is the studies that we have done on trans healthcare show that overwhelmingly there's a positive response to said healthcare. There's an overwhelmingly positive response in outcomes to people who have actually received proper healthcare. So if we are to maintain do no harm, if we are to accept that, then to do no harm, you would have to engage in trans-affirming care, gender-affirming care. You do less harm to somebody when they say, hey, my name is Stuart, not Emily, and you refer to them by the name that they have requested. You overwhelmingly do less harm when you do that than when you assume you know what is going on in their head. You do infinitely more harm when you make those kinds of assumptions. The minute that you can scan somebody's brain and know the individualized version of every thought that they have is the day when you can start assuming those things about their gender. But until that day comes, I'm just going to assume that you don't have access to that information by and large, and I should disregard anything that you say. Now, while it is true that there are people who do feel like they need to be part of some oppressed group and will then seek things like transitioning without being fully informed, or there are people who, again, just do not get proper therapy on the way so that there's a professional who's able to go, yeah, no, this all tracks out. While all those things can happen, they are shockingly rare, as evidenced by the shockingly rare amount of detransitioners who pop up in the data. And because there is a shockingly few amount of detransitioners in the data, I would assume that, statistically speaking, if you meet a trans person, they probably know what the fuck they're talking about in regards to their own gender. Because the data metes out that likely they are correct. Even though there are some individuals that will not be correct, even though there are some individuals that will lie and will feel like they need to be victims and part of some oppressed group, even though those people do in fact exist, statistically, they are unlikely. And because they are statistically unlikely, you do less harm when you err on that side of caution. And erring on that side of caution looks like engaging in gender-affirming care as opposed to ignoring it. So there are even some detransitioners who were forced to detransition. Yeah, like, even when we look at the detransitioner numbers, those numbers do not mete out that these people willingly detransitioned. Oftentimes, a cited reason for detransitioning is the lack of social care around them, or social ostracization around them. They had negative social effects to transitioning. And that's a thing we can work on. That's not a them problem. Not generally speaking, anyway. Said an adult has the right to fuck up if they transition for stupid reasons anyway. Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, people have the right to do things that might be considered mistakes. You have the right to get a stupid tattoo that looks dumb on you and regret it later. You have the right to permanently modify your body in a way that may be seen as detrimental later in your life. You have the right to do that. My problem is when people on the right try to take that right away. It is informed consent after all. Yep, and we oftentimes have to assume that the consent was informed if there is an adult involved. So, Silver J, thank you for the subscription. Where is... There's a person here. Nope, they got me. They got me. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. That's as far into the Phil Rogan and Dr. Joe show that I can go. I cannot push myself any further into that mired mess. Insert end of video tagline here. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability that Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Britzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Nixie-chan, the Oberon team, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.